like Vishal said, this is really a matter of evolution. And many times we see, he spoke about how 50 volunteers came in, and then there were these 2 volunteers who made a lot of difference. But I would take one step behind that and say that how do we try and get, apart from 50 volunteers, maybe the number of people who can write the check is 500 or 5,000 in that organization. And that begins my first journey of starting to engage with the sector. You've got to start with something easy. Even Dr. Rajan mentioned about the fact that you want to give it the spike and then allow it to start from a 1-day activity to a 365-day-a-year activity. So I think it's really the beginning of the journey where you cut the check. Even for us, even for Give India, it wasn't a matter of saying that it should be transactional. The purpose of giving money really was to take something of yourself, is to sacrifice something that you hold dear and give back. And because it's the easiest journey, we believe that a large number of people will take the step. And then it's just a funnel approach. And some people will move into volunteering, some people will move into more engaged volunteering. But the idea really being is, can we get people to start? And how do we get the maximum number of people to start? We actually don't even track this journey. So I don't have the lovely stories that Vishal spoke about. But I do know for a fact that it is something that corporates have started to understand. They've started to recognize. It was really interesting to see some of the statistics that Dr. Rajan put up. And these are the kind of statistics we've been talking a lot to corporates about, but with Western numbers. And corporates don't like Western numbers. Best practices are Western, but numbers which are not suitable will not be taken. And it's great to see that India now has studies which are really saying the same thing, that employee engagement is an important thing. And I think it's really the beginning of the journey, which definitely the culmination, as he spoke, has to be in leadership and has to be change makers.
Okay, we've just have Srivatsan Rajan, who's just joined us. He's the managing partner in India for Bain and Company. I remember the first call which the task force Probono had, and when you joined us on call. And so I'm just going to jump in. And from the Bain perspective, we're looking at volunteering and we're looking at monetizing. And I know the formula will get refined and go through iterations. So my question to you first is it possible for us to just have a single value as such for volunteering? What are the considerations that we need to take in when we monetize volunteering? Because I think one of the questions which came up during the pro bono discussions also was, can we say that this amount monetized is directly translating into value for the non-profit? I know legal firms assign billable hours for pro bono practice.
Sure, so sorry for joining you late. My flight was over an hour late. So I ran from the airport to get here on time. So I'm sure I missed a big chunk of the discussion, but I'll start, this aspect of monetization. My belief is that, my aspiration is that people and corporates support the volunteering effort at some level without worrying too much about the monetization part. I think it's a facilitator. I'm happy that the government is, making all these changes. But at the end of the day, the way we have to look at this is that we're in a country that needs all our help. And I would like the aspiration to be that individuals find a way to actually do this, out of the goodness of their heart. I would like this to be a situation where corporates don't worry too much about, what the dollar amount is or the rupee amount is. And they find it, we have a history, Open represents a Tata Group, we have a history of corporates who for the last 100 years have done so much for the community and for the country without actually worrying about what the tax rate is. I think that's what we should be aiming for. But I will come back and answer the question very specifically. But so I absolutely think that if you put your mind to it, I think there is a way to actually think through the value of what you're putting in and what you're getting out. I think what you're getting out, that aspect is very important. I think there should be a more scientific approach towards measurement of outcomes. One of the things that concerns me, especially about what's going on in this country, there's a lot of effort on the part of NGOs already, and there's a lot of effort that's going on over but there's very little scientific measurement of the outcomes. And I think this is important because it's only when you do that do you understand where people are making a difference and where they're not. And also you start understanding what best practices are, and you also start understanding how you can then take those best practices to other places. I think the measurement of outcomes is very important, and I think, as a nation we need to figure out how we can become better at this so that we can then have a higher and a larger impact across the country in the specific areas that we pick up. So that's but the very specific answer to your question, can it be done? It absolutely can be done, and I think that absolutely should be done in terms of what we should do going forward.
Okay. What about my next question is also to you,
Sure.
since you came in late.
Sure, okay. I'll never come in late again.
When we're talking about volunteering, and so two things. One is bottom line implications on the business side.
Yeah.
There is the carrot, which is, you can monetize company time under the CSR provision.
Sure.
But notwithstanding that, there are still certain, compulsions on the business side when companies which are large employee base would look at volunteering. So what are the implications on bottom line? And two, my next additional to that is, how do you achieve scale without compromising on that?
So both, I would say, are very good questions. The first part in terms of, the implications on the bottom line, I'll answer the question from a slightly different perspective. And I say this from the very real experience of, our aspiration at Bain is to encourage every single individual to do some volunteering activity. I think we do fairly well, and one of the examples, not everything that we do, but one of the examples, we shut the office down for a day and we take everyone out in the community to do some work. And the intent is to give people a sense of what it means to actually go out and work in the community. And I hate to use this example, but I'll use it. But my first brush with volunteering actually came when I was living in the States. And when I grew up, it never occurred to me that even though I lived in a country that had all these needs, that I should go out and really think seriously about volunteering. The answer to your question is it's a very different generation now. I think people are more exposed. In our company, in our firm, one of the ways that we actually motivate people is because they want to engage with the community. And this generation of people actually wants to find meaning and motivation in terms of what they do. And it's not necessarily what you come to the office for. So I would say that one of the ways that companies need to sort of look at this and the way to have an impact on the bottom line is that it actually the more you engage employees with the community, I think they will find a lot more meaning in terms of what they do. And I guarantee this, I know this for a fact, that it actually has an implication around motivation, retention, all of that. So that's one answer. I've forgotten the second question.
How do you achieve scale?
How do you achieve scale? That's a very important thing. The fragmentation of volunteerism is actually one of the big issues that we need to deal with, which is that, and I'm assuming that's the question that you're asking, which is that, you can, if this movement was successful, and let's say we had millions and millions of people doing volunteerism, first of all, I think that would be a great outcome. I think we should try and do that, and even if everyone is not aligned and people are just out there working in the communities, I think that would be terrific. So let me just state that. But the flip side of that is that you could lead to a lot of fragmentation in terms of the effort, and you don't actually then get people aligned to achieve scale in terms of what you're doing. The answer to that in my mind is to actually find ways to have companies pick up certain causes and have them engage in those causes across the organization. And you bring the organization skills of management that the company has, bring it to bear, and then that's the way you achieve scale in certain causes. That's my perspective. But I would say that that's a second order thing that we should sort of wait and worry about. I think the first thing that we should do is to really engage this country in terms of going out. We need to increase the level of that would be my take.
Okay, Virajji, picking up, where we left off earlier, cognizant, any kind of, more than a mandated kind of thing, but how do you mobilize the volunteers? India, everyone's working at least 60 hours a week. Okay? So, places like Bombay, you add travel time into, factor that in as well. Technically, you're just left with a Saturday, which then volunteering becomes the last thing to do, which you keep putting off. So, how do you really mobilize and get the volunteers on board?
It's a very important question. Like I said, if you kind of want to achieve that scale and want to have a sustained volunteerism, when I talked about this 50,000 plus people, it's actually sustained volunteers. We did start with one-off event type. That's how we kind of started off, and then. One thing that we felt was that people should feel that they are empowered, that they are running their own project type. So though we have a PMO, the PMO actually acts as a facilitating body. So each of the BUs, they form their own council, and whoever is kind of the most inspirational volunteer within that group, the leader is asked to choose them or kind of elect them, and they kind of leads the overall council. And when we choose a school or something, typically they kind of go and choose a school which is nearby to their development center, so that they can spare their office time. And we don't really go back and mandate that you should have so many hours of volunteering. Okay, they go and volunteer because most of the times if you volunteer on Saturdays, it's great, but then many times the schools also need help during the school hours and so on. So they do that. And so the BUs adjust in terms of, thankfully for our industry, still flexi hours works, right? So if they come back and compensate in the late evening hours or on Saturdays, it works. So they work during the working hours. Our working hours itself is little flexible, and therefore they're able to accommodate. Not all projects have flexi hours, there are also fixed hours and so on. So that is where, as I was saying, that those who want to go for, like the weekend to their suburbs or to their hometowns, we also allow them to adopt schools into that rural area. So something that which will make everybody to kind of go and meaningfully contribute. That's one. And second is we also kind of motivate. We don't actually monetize it per se from a volunteering hours standpoint, but we do a lot of gamification in that sense. Kind of compute it as impact index and so on. And there's a kind of team-wise competition. Like which we use and what is the impact. And there's a regular thing. In fact, our most creative team with a lot of infographics and that kind of things. I don't know where the creative energy comes. They come back and they do the branding, and all the campaigning goes on around this outreach program because it's a success.
So additional competition in addition to the competition they had on business hours.
So there's a lot of impact in this, the gamification and so on. And we also go back and recognize the importance of that. For example, if somebody is getting an award, like that unit is getting an award, that individual impact volunteer is getting an award. More than the monetary award, it's actually the time that they get with the executive management and leadership and so on. So these are some of the aspects which kind of keeps them motivated, and they come back and say that they get to, the council leaders take them out for a lunch and then spend time with them, even if they are just new entrant in the organization and so on. Okay. So these are the kind that they feel that, hey, this is actually like, get me recognized type. So those are the kind of motivations that I would say that it definitely helps. And last, your travel time. Technology comes as a big boom, right? Today, you don't have to necessarily travel. Today, wherever, that is where the foundation and outreach, we kind of jointly collaborate. We go back and look at the schools, wherever the school is also reciprocating equally well for this consumption of this volunteering and so on. We go back and equip them in terms of infrastructure. We provide them all the broadband connectivity, computers and so on. Now our volunteers are able to do a very meaningful volunteering sitting in their office, connecting through the technology. So technology plays a big role there as well.
Shala, that I volunteer, there's, I think, one of the organizations which I've seen, apart from, evangelizing, volunteering also, that you do find meaningful ways to really recognize the volunteering effort. I happened to witness one of those events. How important is, and what is really, everybody wants some recognition at the end of it,
Okay, so recognition is definitely one big form of motivation. So I'll talk about recognition first. So we did realize that, I think like I was saying earlier, that it's a very different ethos of volunteering that exists in the country today. There's almost no form of recognition that is there at a national level, social level, family level, corporate level, in institutes, in the societies where we live, almost anywhere, all of at a political level. So while there exists a lot of different recognition for a lot of different activities, volunteering is not something which is seen as something which is recognized by the people around us, by our friends, family, colleagues, peers. And until unless that happens, more and more numbers will not really drive in. So what we really found was that for about 10, 12 years of volunteering, a lot of volunteering was happening in private. So people do. It's not that Indians do not do. A lot of Indian people do good, but they're not the ones who share about it. There are not enough studies that are there about it. There are not enough best case practices that are kind of there about it. So we recognized that kind of as a requirement, and we launched our own awards a couple of years back to recognize the best practices by the corporates, by the NGOs, and by the volunteers that have developed by themselves. But apart from recognition, I do want to, so your last question began by about, the 60 hours of time spent on kind of, workplace and plus commuting and all of that in the big cities. So we have a slightly different take on it. We really believe that, people find time for what they really love. Whether it is movies, whether it is pubs, whether it is work, whether it is travel. Whatever it is, people really find time for what they love. So we really have to make sure that we show them that engagement, which is deep enough to kind of, excite them internally. So there are those, so I think there are those internal things that you could make work. For example, where I feel that I really love this task and I must do it, and there are the external factors which are, for example, recognition by the external society. We have to strike at both of them, and everybody drives very differently. One of the other things I want to take is, like Vishal was mentioning earlier, that we grow evolution of a volunteer from kind of engaging at a periphery to kind of becoming a core volunteer and a champion. We've also practiced that for long. One of the things that we realize is that in some cases, for example, with senior management, the linear progression doesn't really work. So we had this person, Suman Srivastava, who was a part of our an activity called Whiteboard. He used to head RSCG earlier, and his task was to begin what is the best use of my time. Don't just bring me in and kind of get me into so many of these things. I want to start right away through impact. So at the same time, so what you realize is that within professionals, we have to have different engagements for different kind of people at different levels. And I think that's where a corporate programming will also do well.
Picking up from what Shalabh just said and how Dream has evolved, and given that right now this whole initiative is also to bring in the thousands and millions of professionals through the non-profits, I think one important question which I know Pushpa has raised and at other forums Shalabh and I have raised is the preparedness of the non-profit. What has been the lessons, early lessons, and how, you spoke about the setting up of systems and processes. Obviously, the volunteer is there for a finite time. He comes with high skills. We spoke about fragmentation of the engagement in itself. How did we really, get ready for that? And what are the things that corporates really need to consider when you're looking at NGO preparedness?
I think that's a very good question. There is definitely a big challenge of NGO preparedness, and we continue to see that across the board. Because corporates do come in with a certain understanding of structures and systems, and they like working in structured environments. And a lot of non-profits, because of the causes they represent, usually are very ambiguous, or sometimes just do not have the skills or the resources to be able to have systems and processes in mind. What some of the things that we learned, there were many things. I'm going to just highlight a few. One was what I said earlier, that volunteering is not going to be top priority for an individual, ever till they become a champion for a cause. So recognizing that and then reworking our system around that. Reworking our system to create opportunities for first-time volunteers to have that wow experience, that transformative experience, that hook, which then says, not bad, I want to do this again. Get my family involved. If that's why I want to spend my Saturday, then I want to do that. To actually get to the core, like Shalabh said, actually get to the core of why they want to do this, and if they get to the, okay, I love doing this. So I had a volunteer, for example, who once said, I don't know if I'm actually creating an impact in the child's life, but I know I'm going to be a much more sensitive father. Now, that's true impact of volunteering, because now we are preparing the next generation where children from a very young age will start volunteering and will become part of their DNA. We had to put systems in processes. For example, child protection. We work with children. We engage 3,000 volunteers a year. What are the challenges with child protection? So because the society didn't have systems for child protection in place, police verification, we had to put in our own systems. So some things that we do is, for example, no volunteer actually volunteers with a group of children alone. It's always group volunteering. We realize with a lot of corporate volunteering, there are last minute challenges of workspace commitments. So when you're volunteering, we always create a pool of volunteers which are more than what we need in a project. If I need 5 volunteers in a project, I'm signing up 8. So if there are last minute cancellations, I know I have backup to deal with. Also recognizing some of the projects where volunteering will not work, which are mission critical. So also recognizing which projects where we can actually engage volunteers and which projects we cannot engage volunteers, and being able to demarcate that. Using technology. So we almost created an internal Facebook system for volunteers. So today we've got 3,000 volunteers signed up into a closed group Facebook where a lot of communication happens. We also realized that initially a lot of our communication was one way. We had to change that and make a more co-owned, co-created, co-engaging process. So this Facebook kind of system now allows volunteers who are going on the field to say, okay, I'm going here today, who else is joining me? Or put up photographs, or put up blogs, or write testimonials, or give us feedback of what didn't work in the project side. So it's aspects like that. The other thing that we put in place, which worked very well for us, was reporting back to the volunteer. It was absolutely critical for volunteers to know, like what Rajan said about impact. How is their time creating impact on a single child, on a group of children, in the system, in the organization? So for example, we've had these 2 volunteers from the National Health Service from UK who have been coming for 2 months every year for the last 8 years. The 2 areas of impact that they've helped us create a mentoring program for one-to-one mentoring for young adolescents, which today engages about 250 young people from communities and 250 volunteers on a year-long mentoring relationship. The second, most importantly, they helped us create an assessment scale to measure impact of life skills that we develop in children. Early last year, this scale got recognized and was published in an international academic journal, a peer-reviewed international academic journal. But this became our contribution to the sector, where a sector which cannot measure impact very well, we created a scale which today has been used by organizations, not only in India, other than Dream, but in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Guatemala, and UK. So that's really then reporting back to those volunteers about how we're creating that impact. Also being honest when certain impact didn't happen that we said would happen, and telling volunteers maybe it doesn't work. The last thing that I would like to say is that one of the big learnings was how we engaged the corporate. We also realized when corporates come in for first time volunteer engagement development, there's tremendous amount of excitement and a lot of aspiration. We want to do 50,000 volunteers, 50,000 hours. We had to work through corporates and actually help them see the journey of that. That it's a 3-year journey, it's a vision. We worked with a large financial services company which had about 100 people out of 7,000 volunteering. And we created a 3-year vision with them which converted that 100 volunteers into 3,000 volunteers at the end of 3 years. Which meant that the corporate also had to rework some of their practices. How do you incentivize, how do you recognize? For example, we realized that one of the strongest motivators for people to volunteer was that it was a fast-forward way to have lunch with the president of the company.
Oh, that's good.
And loved it. And we leveraged that. We leveraged that. When we work with communities, we said you have to create those systems which will enable people to have being recognized by the senior management. And it's a long-term journey. It's about creating a vision to create together, not just about volunteering, but also how these volunteers are creating an impact in the lives of children that we work with.
Okay. So I'm going to stick to the time limit and very quickly sum up. Firstly, thank you all. I think some of the key things that we heard today were, important for us to measure outcomes. You want to fragment and very specifically set the volunteering engagements. You want to have projects which are not mission critical. You want to have good reporting mechanisms to volunteers. You want to have some kind of rewards and recognitions. So maybe, Sanjeev, along with going viral and things like that, we should get all the CEOs and MDs to say that their bit for pro bono will be they'll have lunch or dinners with the volunteers of their companies. And on that note, thank you all. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. May I request the guests to move for high tea, and the questions can be taken up there during interaction with the members and the guests. Thank you, everybody.